Hi, I'm here tonight to talk to you about a topic that's actually really near and dear to my heart. I started off as a scientist looking at flavor preferences in primates, then moved on actually to look at domestication in dogs, which is how I wound up taking blood from dogs all over the world. So this kind of merges those two interests, and I'm going to be talking to you about why all of the species on this particular slide, and a large number of other species that I haven't been able to find good pictures of, are actually supposed to taste like chicken. So why do so many things taste like chicken? It might just be that human beings are very bad at describing taste. We really tend to say, oh, that's sweet, that's salty, that's spicy. But actually, as anyone who's ever been to a wine tasting can tell you, human beings can be incredibly imaginative about adjectives they're applying to food. So maybe the question should be, why doesn't everything taste like pork or beef? So if we consider the evolution of the animal kingdom by flavor, and here, I really need to thank Joe Stanton, Dr. Joe Stanton of the Harvard MCZ, who actually published this lovely phylogenetic tree in the Annals of Improbable Research, despite the fact that I'm going to disagree with his hypothesis. So Dr. Stanton's suggestion is that actually human beings aren't tasting chicken, they're tasting the default tetrapod flavor, the default flavor of anything that is a four-legged animal. Now I have a couple problems with this. One, Dr. Stanton's research was based mainly off of his own flavor experimentation. Sample size of 1 is not fabulous, and he may have been somewhat biased in his choices of which species to taste. Number 2, there's particular species that are invertebrates that I think Dr. Stanton was remiss to not include, particularly termites and beetle larvae, which are said to taste like chicken. Now, given that these things taste like chicken, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense, parsimoniously, for fish and shrimp to not taste like chicken. If this is a default trait, then why do fish taste like fish, or why do shrimp taste like shrimp, instead of just tasting like chicken? So what Dr. Stanton thinks is just the default flavoring, I actually think is convergent evolution. When something tastes like chicken, it's because it's actually been strongly selected upon to taste like chicken. So I'd like to call this phenomenon gustatory mimicry. This is actually a relatively common phenomenon in the animal kingdom. You have species like the milk snake, which imitate the coloring of the coral snake. The coral snake is a very poisonous snake, and so by imitating the coloring without imitating the poison, the milk snake is able to send the message to predators and other animals, leave me alone, I'm poisonous. In just the same way, when, for example, frogs wind up imitating the flavor of chickens, they're saying, farm me, I'm tasty and delicious. They don't necessarily have to be tasty and delicious, they don't have to be healthy, but because chicken is perceived as delicious and healthy, they can do just fine. Now, you might think, okay, why in the world would you want to be a chicken? This is an animal that human beings eat. But as it turns out, the gene is selfish. It doesn't care whether or not it gets eaten so long as it gets passed on beforehand. Human beings are the most successful charismatic megafauna on the planet, and we are tremendously good at passing on the genes of animals that we like. There are dogs on every continent, and there are chickens on every continent except for Antarctica. So what's good for the goose winds up being good for the gander. If you taste like chicken, you're encouraging human beings to farm you, and therefore getting them to do all of the work of spreading your genes. So why doesn't everything taste like chicken? Consider the specific species that are using this strategy. These are species which will either be marginalized by humans or which are considered pest species by humans. So things like kangaroos, which may lose territory to humans, things like guinea pigs and termites, which might be considered pest species. So these are things that are going to have large amounts of contact with human beings, which means that human beings will have a chance to taste them. And human beings will actually consider tasting them because they're not particularly sophisticated predators. Obviously, polar bears are not going to be something that human beings consider farming because they're predators, and so they're not going to wind up being chicken flavored. The other thing that is required for an animal to successfully employ this strategy is a strong selective pressure or bottleneck to ensure the uniformity of flavor. So deer don't taste like chicken, but this is in part because, as anyone who's ever driven in the country at night can tell you, deer don't really seem to suffer from a population bottleneck because of their contact with human beings. So why does flavor mimicry require a bottleneck? That's mainly because the more genetic variation you have, the more flavor variation you have. And a bottleneck is going to reduce that genetic variation, and so it's going to reduce the flavor variation. So if a human happens to encounter your species and perceive it as a food item, then they're much more likely to get the same taste more than once and really get behind this idea of, yes, we should farm this animal. So why not beef or pork? As it turns out, it's relatively costly to produce beef or pork. We wind up having large-scale farming efforts for cows in America, but in many places, cultural taboos have evolved probably because of the large cost of producing pork and beef. And so it's just not as successful of a strategy to imitate pork or beef flavor because there are a lot of places in the world where people just aren't going to perceive that as a tasty flavor. Now, the last thing I want to address, you may have noticed on my first slide. You may have noticed on my first slide that I included a picture of Hannibal Lecter. As it turns out, cannibals have frequently said that human beings taste like chicken. Now, why would human beings taste like chicken? Because basically human beings are trying to promote bonding in as many ways as they possibly can. And so they're co-opting the wonderful, happy feelings that you get when you eat something tasty for basically bonding you to any individual you come into oral contact with. So the next time you kiss your loved ones, you kiss your loved ones or eat a tasty chicken or guinea pig or alligator, be thankful for the mutualism that makes it happen.